things are really happening, and we're pushing ahead on multiple fronts, and we're keen to get this underway. So next year we're aiming for our feasibility study, and all of this feeds into that feasibility study.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by Rockfire Resources Chief Executive David Price. David, very good to speak with you. You're out with more positive results from drilling at Molaoi. Can you take us through the latest at the projects and what the focus is at the moment?
Yeah, sure, Stephen. Thanks very much for having me on Proactive yet again, and look forward to bringing everybody up to speed. There's actually quite a lot that's going on site at the moment, and we've got multiple programs running simultaneously. Having said that, August is a bit of a dead month, and most Europeans tend to go and lie in the sun in August, and particularly we find that's the case in Greece, where most of the Greeks will take their annual summer holiday in August. So that's why at the moment our drilling rig is shut down, and we're not currently drilling. So that's something that it has certainly been conveyed to the market already, and we're looking at restarting towards the end of August. So no real surprises there, but it does put a hole in our exploration program for a good solid month, really. So what's happening at the moment? We have been drilling continuously, and we're going to continue that drilling once the end of August approaches. And this is infill drilling. So we're drilling between existing drill holes, and we're hitting continuous zinc, which is no surprising because the holes around it also hit zinc. So we're hitting the zinc as anticipated, but more importantly, we're actually bringing in the results of germanium, which has never been analysed for historically. So we will end up with an inferred, a maiden resource for germanium. That's one of our aims, as well as an upgraded indicated resource for the zinc, the lead and the silver. That drilling is ongoing. We will be getting our own drill rig, and I'll talk about that and the progress of that shortly. But the new drill rig will be put onto the main part of the resource, and we will continue with 2 rigs, with 1 rig advancing the northern extensions to the resource to see how big this project can actually be. So multiple targets, if you like, on the drilling, which is great. We also had the ecological study, which is nearing completion. So the ecological study is needed for the northern part of the license. We needed to have that ecological study done prior to doing exploration work to the northern part, and that's a 5-kilometre trend. So it's quite a long time, a long distance that we have to drill out those targets. And so we wanted to get that ecological study underway and completed as quickly as we can. So we expect that to be at the end of August, if not early September, for that ecological study to be approved. We're doing a water study, a hydrology study, and that's an ongoing study. So that study is actually measuring and monitoring the water inflow to the valley that we're drilling in, and also the water outflow from the valley. So that's an important part of the project that will continue to be monitored, not only before mining, but during mining and indeed after mining. So that's something that's a long-term part of the feasibility study, if you like. We've now had some of our core samples arrived at the laboratory in the UK for comminution testing, which is crushing and grinding. And that's going to have 2 aspects. One is to make sure that the equipment selection is correct. So there'll be different types of equipment that will crush the rock differently. We want to make sure that we crush it as efficiently as we can. And also, of course, that includes the grinding to a powder. So there's 2 stages: the crushing, which will crush it to about 1 centimetre, and then the grinding, which will grind it to a very fine powder. So those comminution tests will occur, and it'll probably take a good month or 2 to get those tests completed. So keep an eye on that. That's something that will come in the next month or 2, the results of that test. And it also tells us what sort of power requirements we're going to need to be able to operate that type of machinery. So, of course, those power requirements get fed into the feasibility study. So it's important to know that. And this is all part of the pre-feasibility, if you like, Stephen. It's actually preparing for the feasibility and making sure that we've got all the relevant information backed up by data that we're going to feed into our feasibility study. We're going to do UCS, which is unconfined compressive strength tests. And what happens is that when you're underground and you blast and you create a void underground, then new stresses appear on the rocks. Those stresses will be vertical, they'll be horizontal, and there'll be a combination of directions that stresses will actually be subjected on the rocks. And it's important that we know how much pressure will those rocks take before they fail, because the last thing we want is a failure of the rocks underground. So these tests are very important. The engineers will build that into their mine design, and it's very important work. So again, it feeds into the feasibility, and we're keen to get that underway. That's already started, so those samples have arrived at the lab for that test work as well. We're also doing ore sorting to see if we can increase the grade prior to going into the processing plant, and we're looking particularly at X-ray transmission. So what that does is that they hit the rock with an X-ray machine. It does take an X-ray of the rock, and that determines the atomic density. And of course, mineralized rock has a lot higher atomic density than unmineralized rock. So it can separate out rock that in fact might be difficult to determine visually. So these sort of tests will help us to upgrade our average grade as we put in. And there's no guarantee that these will be, that they'll work, but we have to do these tests to make sure that we give the chances, the highest chance we can of this being a success. So that all feeds into that feasibility. Of course, the underground, we're getting the studies done to reopen the old underground from the 1990s. And I think that study is about a 4-month study to be able to get all the permits in place to actually then start to rehabilitate the underground mine. So that study has started. So that's ongoing as well. And of course, the drill rig preparation for our drill rig arriving. So we have a new core yard, which is great. It's a big core yard. It'll take a lot more core for when we're having 2 rigs providing core to us. So that's important to have that in place. That's been prepared. The shed's looking great. So we're ready to go when our drill rig arrives. And we're still looking at September for a delivery date. So no update on that. It's still the same date. So look, things are really happening, and we're pushing ahead on multiple fronts. And we're keen to get this underway. So next year, we're aiming for our feasibility study, and all of this feeds into that feasibility study.
Well, David, it sounds like good progress is being made. I hope you'll continue to keep us updated.
Yep, sure will. Anytime. It's great to be able to update the market. Thank you.
David, thanks for your time. That's David Price, Chief Executive of Rockfire Resources.